Spring training is just about over. I mean, we got a couple weeks left, but things are starting to really illuminate as far as what this roster is going to look like and how the Cubs are going to present themselves to start the season against the Rangers. And we're going to talk to our friend Al Yellon about it right here on the Cubs baseball channel. But before we go there, make sure that you like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up and hit the bell so you know when we're dropping new content. Let's get this thing started. Here's your invitation. All right. What do you say, everybody? With Al Yellon at Bleed Cubby Blue. I'm Mick Gillispie at Broadcaster Mick on the socials. And it is great to see you, Al, from out in Arizona. I will be out there myself here shortly again, but good to see you. And how's spring training treated you so far?
Everything's good. Weather's been great. The baseball's been pretty good. So have no complaints about spring training. It's all good.
It's been a fun year in spring training wise. Cubs one of the best records in baseball. It's always fun to win, even when the games don't count, right? Let's start with Craig Counsell. Your thoughts on the new Cubs manager. What have you seen? Any difference between, what David Ross might have done up until now, or has it been about the same, you think?
Well, this is obviously the most important move the Cubs made all offseason is hiring Craig Counsell. Because he brings a different perspective. We've seen him from the other side for 9 years in Milwaukee, and I've been impressed with the way he's been able to make winning teams without big payrolls and with teams that it didn't really seem like they could win with the kind of personnel that he had. So I look forward to him bringing some different ideas. I remember reading that. During the interview that Counsell had with Jed Hoyer, he said, "Don't hire me if you expect things to be done the same way as they've always been done." So he's, I think he's going to shake things up. I like the way he handles pitching staffs and bullpens. That was one of the things I think that David Ross had a little bit of trouble with, especially last September when the Cubs bullpen collapsed. So I think that will be one of the real strengths of Counsell is handling the pitching staff better.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's really hard to say what's different between he and Rossi, just because I don't know that there really has been anything done that anybody else wouldn't have done. Like they had another roster cut on Sunday. Matt Mervis sent to the minor leagues. But to me, it just doesn't seem like there really hasn't been a surprise yet as far as the roster management goes. Do you feel that way, or how have you seen that?
One of the things that Counsell has definitely done is take extended looks at David Bote at different positions. Bote spent the whole year at Iowa last year, never got a call up at all, even though he can play multiple positions. Counsell's looked at him in left field and at shortstop, in addition to second and third base where he normally plays. So that could be a little bit of a surprise. Bote will need a 40-man roster spot if he's going to go to the opening day roster with the team, but I could see it happening, based on how Counsell has taken really an extended look at him.
Yeah, and that was where I was gonna kind of go next. Could David Bote make the team? I mean, he's done such a great job this spring. He's been the guy who you can't ignore. I mean, it's been the home runs, but it's also been the defense. He had a game against the White Sox in the rain where he made a couple diving plays at second base, ran into Bote on one of the backfields last week, and he was working left with, obviously at that point, Ian Happ out. But do you think he can really make the team? And if he does make the team, at whose expense is it? Is it because maybe Nick Madrical's on the IL and that's how he slides in? I mean, would that be how he could do it?
That could very well be. Bote plays a couple of the same positions that Madrigal does, second and third base. Madrigal hasn't played in almost 3 weeks, and we haven't really heard anything about how he's coming back. So I could see Madrigal starting the year on the injured list and Bote making the team. Like I said, he needs a 40-man spot. And when other guys come back, if the Cubs need to move on from Bote and bring somebody else back, well, Bote's got that $5 million contract. So if they put him on waivers, nobody's going to claim that, and they could stash him in Iowa again. Because again, Bote does have the right, if he does get put on waivers, he could decline that and become a free agent. But then he loses the $5 million contract. So I don't think he's going to do that.
Yeah,
So
right.
there's a guy with positional versatility and roster versatility who could really help this team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that at some point they'll put Caleb Killian on the 60-day IL. That opens up a spot. But then what happens with the backup first baseman, Garrett Cooper, Dominique Smith? I mean, I don't think David Peralta is going to make it because of his issues throwing the ball right now. But your thoughts on that? Because I feel like when I look at this roster, it's probably going to be Cooper, but they're going to want to keep one of these guys, veteran guys, to play first base just in case Michael Busch doesn't cut it.
My feeling is that the signings of Cooper and Smith and Peralta were all done as kind of hedges just in case Cody Bellinger wasn't re-signed. Mm-hmm. Well, Bellinger is back. So is there really a place for any of these guys? Patrick Wisdom can play first base. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe there's your backup first baseman. As opposed to Smith or Cooper. I don't see Cooper doing anything offensively that Patrick Wisdom can't do. Granted, Wisdom strikes out a lot, but he has a lot more power than Cooper.
Right.
So that and the fact that these guys would all need a 40-man roster spot, I just don't see a place for them. Maybe they'll get creative and find one, but at the moment, I don't see one.
Do you think that it's Bote or one of these guys, or could Bote and one of these guys make it?
I think it's probably Bote or one of these guys. I don't really see room for both.
Yeah, and I see it the same way. I would be a little surprised if Bote made the team, but I would be happy because I do want to see him succeed just because personally I like him and I know him, and I think it would be great. And it really has surprised me. And I was kind of one of the first people I know anyway that said there had to be some kind of riff with Rossi because we didn't see him at all. He's paid to be in the big leagues, and maybe having a new manager has given him new life because he's looked like the old David Bote again.
Right. I mean, obviously you've got a fresh perspective in Craig Counsell. You have no preconceived notions. Bote has had major league success. As you may recall, he had that injury, that separated shoulder in 2021 that really set him back, kind of ruined that season. And then he didn't do well in 22. Last year, as you mentioned, he spent the whole year at Iowa. But now you got a new guy coming in. And as I mentioned, a guy who doesn't want to do things the way they've always been done. So, he's given a guy a chance. And, spring training stats don't always mean anything, as we know.
Yeah.
But when the guy performs and he can fill a role, maybe the new manager will take a chance on him.
Right. Plus, you're paying him, $5.5 million too. I mean, you're already giving him the money. You might as well. I'm sure everyone would feel a lot better if that money was being spent on a guy in the big leagues. And look, if he plays like he has this spring, you'd feel good about it. I mean, he's been a difference maker.
He's obviously not going to be a starting player. The positions that he plays are pretty much all taken, but he's versatile. He can play the infield positions, probably all of the infield positions. He's played a little first base. So, to give a little backup. And also, if Christopher Morel is going to be the starting third baseman on opening day, and it appears that he is, well, maybe you take him out in the late innings and Bote can play third base for defense. So that's a valuable skill to have.
Yeah, let's talk about Christopher Morel. Rick Sutcliffe said on Saturday on The Score, he was on Bruce Levine's show, that he thought Morel would be an all-star this year. If he's an all-star, that's a great sign for the Cubs. I'm going to tell you my take. There's still a lot of work to be done, but he's got all of the physical talent to be able to make that transition. It's just, to me, it's the consistency of the throws across the diamond that I worry about, and it's not even that he doesn't have the arm or anything. It's just, for some reason, it just seems like he has a difficult time with the accuracy of throwing to first base. Plus, you got a guy that hasn't played first base on the other side of it, and Michael Busch, who's transitioning back to a position he played in college, but hasn't played a lot as a pro. Your thoughts?
It's, for me, it's the more reps he gets at third base, the better he's going to get. He's been working with the coaches. He's playing a lot of third base in spring training games. And Craig Counsell is not the kind of manager who's going to see a couple of errors in spring games and say, well, this guy's not going to be my third baseman.
Right.
He's pretty much said, without totally saying, coming around and saying it, that Morel is going to be the third baseman on opening day. I would guess that Counsell will give him at least a month, see what happens. If it proves that he really can't do it, they'll try something else. But I think he's willing to give him a fair amount of time to prove that he can play the position. And the man can hit. We know that Christopher Morel can hit. If he can play even a league average third base and hit the way he's always hit, well, then that maybe could be an all-star player.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a position where if you hit and you just don't, make a fool of yourself defensively, you could be an all-star, because it's not like I don't remember ever having a whole league of good third basemen. I mean, there's been some guys. Manny Machado's good. Chris Bryant, I always felt like was a little too big for the position, physically, but did a good job and was an all-star there. Aramis Ramirez, to me, is the best third baseman that the Cubs had, in my time anyway.
Well, there's a good comparison as Aramis Ramirez, because Aramis was not really a very good defensive third baseman, but he made himself better over time because he was out there every day and played the position, got reps at the position, made himself at least okay enough. And the way he hit, he played third base for the Cubs for 9 years.
Yeah.
And so, could Christopher Morel do that? Maybe. We hope so. If he really can't handle the position, well, you move him to DH and you find somebody else.
Yeah. I think it's a good point. Let's talk a little bit of pitching. Jameson Taillon still not in action. We know that he's feeling better. There's a timeline now. Jed's basically have said, MRI came back relatively clean. He's going to be ready to go sometime early, right? So I'm not expecting him to debut in May. I mean, I'm guessing it's somewhere in April. But with him out, and then Shöta Imanaga having pitched in Japan, where it's like a 6-man rotation, how do you think the Cubs stack up the starting rotation? And who are the guys that you would put in the rotation in that back end spot?
Well, Craig Counsell has already said he's going to kind of try to get creative with Imanaga to give him the rest that he needs and try and eventually, I think, get him accustomed to a 5-man rotation that we have in Major League Baseball as opposed to in Japan. The Cubs have 3 off days within their first 11 games. Mm-hmm. So that will help not only for, getting Taillon ready without missing too many starts, but to give Imanaga some room. They've talked about having a 5-man rotation with maybe throwing in an occasional 6th guy. With Taillon out, it looks like maybe Drew Smiley will take that last spot. Maybe Javier Assad takes that last spot, or maybe they do some mixing and matching between those two until Taillon is back. So the good news is that the Cubs have options this year to replace those missing players, which in the last couple of years they have not had. So that's the good news. There is some starting pitcher depth.
Do you think they're done as far as trades or signings between now and, I mean, I guess we really couldn't calculate what happens at the at the trade deadline, but do you think there's anything else brewing here, or are we set to start the season?
For now, yeah, I think they're setting. I keep seeing people saying, well, the Cubs should sign Blake Snell. And, first of all, the latest so-called demand that he made was a 2-year deal for $33 million a year. And I don't see the Cubs in any way, shape, or form wanting to make Blake Snell their highest paid player. I think Snell's a bit overrated.
Yeah.
He's had 2 great Cy Young seasons. The rest of his career has just been okay. That, to me, that doesn't scream out $33 million a year. Mm-hmm. The Cubs do not, at least for now, they don't want to go over the first luxury tax level, and they're almost right at it. Maybe if they need to add somebody at the deadline, they might consider that if they think there's just like one guy who could put them over the top. But I think what you see now in spring training games, that's what you're going to get on opening day.
Yeah, it's so, like, I say this on my channel. I don't even get into it too much. You can't even look at the number and really calculate what it is, because what are you going to calculate bonuses? How do you figure out, how many guys are coming up during the season? You got to have a gap there.
You say these
guys go way over, right?
Right. These guys have lots of accountants and finance people who calculate those down to the penny, I'm sure. But yeah, they got to make sure that they got that all accounted for, during the season, how that's going to affect the the eventual luxury tax number.
Who's been the most, and besides Bote, who's been the guy who has been most impressive to you so far this spring?
Well, let's see. That's a good question. Miles Mastrobuoni's had a pretty good spring,
Mhm.
playing multiple positions. Um,
He's a
Says is
dirtbag. You kind of, it wasn't right away. I didn't see it, but then you start to watch him more, and I could see why Rossi liked him. He's
he's a good
fast,
he's a good 26th man to have on your
right?
roster.
Gritty.
Um, Among the starting players, Seiya Suzuki has had an amazing spring. He's hitting the ball hard even when he makes outs. It looks like it's a continuation of what he did last August and September, when all of a sudden he seemed to figure it out and start hitting like they expected him to hit when he came over from Japan. I expect Suzuki to have a monster year for the
Yeah,
Cubs.
me too. Me too. And I love the Japanese culture, the baseball culture that these guys bring to the clubhouse. I like the fact that it's such a team oriented game in Japan, that the players out there take the team aspect of it and put that ahead of their own individual accomplishments. I'm impressed by how good Japanese baseball has gotten. And there were some guys that would come over and succeed, right? But there were a lot of guys that would come over and fail. Now it's like, man, these guys come over, and I don't know what the numbers are, but it feels like the success rate is a lot different now than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, overall, the Japanese Pro League NPB is probably just a slight bit lower in quality than Major League Baseball, but you've seen all these guys come over, both hitters and pitchers, who have had great success. Now the Cubs have two Japanese players between Suzuki and Shöta Imanaga. Imanaga has looked very good in spring training. He's striking out tons of hitters, and that's really the way he was built coming over. Lots of strikeouts, and yes, the occasional home run. Hopefully, he can keep guys off base. He can give up an occasional solo home run. As long as he's striking out all those guys, I think he'll be a success. And I got to say, I was very impressed with his um, introductory news conference when he was first signed, and he sat down and said, "Hey, Chicago, what do you say the Cubs are going to win today?" in
Yeah.
English. It seems like he really has kind of embraced the Cubs franchise, Cubs culture, Cubs fans. As long as he continues to perform, I think he'll be very well liked.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's what we all liked about him from the very outset, that endearing quality of why we like the Cubs, because what we found out was he was in Chicago, and he's just like floating around, and he's like, hey, you know what? This would be a great place to play some baseball. And he made that happen. I mean, he could have gone other places, but I love that about him.
And you don't just hear that from him. When Cody Bellinger was re-signed, he
Yeah.
said, he loved the ballpark, he loved playing at Wrigley Field, he loved the fans, and his family likes Chicago. So this is something that attracts players to want to play for the Cubs, and that creates a connection between the player and the fans.
No doubt. All right. Final thing on our show today. I love asking this question. I see some memorabilia behind you on the wall. Great shot. I'm going to enlarge your picture again just so I can see it. Yeah, I love all that stuff. Your most prized memorabilia.
Well, first, I'm going to move out of the way a little bit. The one right behind in the middle there, that's a drawing of the famous shot on the mound when the Cubs won the World Series, and you can't really see it from here, but there's writing on it, and in the writing is the score of every game from that season, and
Oh,
on the
wow.
shoes it says Cubs win 2016 World Series. It's a very cool
That
piece.
is cool.
But I think I got to say, I thought about this because you asked me to think about what I would answer this question, and I have to say I think it's my World Series tickets. I put those. I've got special displays for them in my house in Chicago, and just look at them. And it's like, yes, the Cubs really did in my lifetime not just play those World Series games in Wrigley Field, but they won the World Series. So
Hmm.
those I think would have to be the most prized pieces of memorabilia that I have.
I remember walking around in Wrigleyville before game 3, really the most, and having that ticket and just not wanting to lose it. like
Right.
like if I lose this, like I don't know how I'm ever gonna get in.
That atmosphere, as I'm sure you remember, was just incredible. It was the energy around the ballpark was something that I think none of us had ever seen before.
Mm-mm. Nope. And after game 5, I was at game 5 with Ben Ingram, who's the voice of the Braves, who got to call his own World Series, and then we met up with Wayne Randazzo, who's the TV voice of the Angels. And we're just out on the street smoking cigars after game 5. And it was just like that huge block party vibe. And I'm like, I think we're going to come back and win this, But I mean, looking back on it now, it still kind of just doesn't even seem real. So that's a great piece right there. And I asked Ron Coomer, he said he's got an authentic autographed Babe Ruth Yankees hat. I don't know how anyone's ever going to beat that. I mean, that's pretty incredible piece of memorabilia. But ticket stubs from the World Series, man, great pick there.
I understand why Major League Baseball and the teams have gone to all mobile tickets these days. I get it, but I think something's been lost there by not having paper tickets for every game, because the paper ticket, if you hold on to it, it's a tangible souvenir of your trip to that baseball game.
Yeah,
and now that doesn't exist anymore.
No.
It's a little something has been lost.
Yeah, well, it's funny you said that. When I was in town and we actually got a paper ticket to the game that we were at, where we went out on the field with our championship rings, and I just kept it. I thought, well, I'm just going to put this in the box that the ring goes in, even though it has nothing to do with that championship ring. But I was thinking the same thing. Like, you don't hardly ever get a ticket stub anymore on any of this stuff.
Right.
Well,
So,
we'll tell everyone about Bleed Cubby Blue and what they can expect there. By the way, and you always enjoy checking out the site, especially when you want to get the latest information on what's going on with the Cubs. Man, you put a lot of different sources in there.
Full coverage of the Cubs, and my focus on the site is I like to try to give people things they won't get anywhere else. Anybody can write about the latest transactions or the latest injuries. I try to do things that shake it up a little bit different. You and I talked this morning about the opening day roster, and this morning I've got an opening day roster, thoughts of who's going to make it and who isn't. And here we are. We're 10 days from opening day, and there are still some places, some spots that are not decided. So we'll see what the Craig Counsell and the front office decide what they want to do over the next 10 days. Always interesting to follow. And if you don't mind, I'm going to give a little plug for my new book that's coming out in June. It's called Chicago Cubs Firsts, which is all kind of various historical facts about things that were first for the franchise, players and the ballpark and just the team itself. And one thing we're going to reveal in the book is a fact that's never been published anywhere before. So, as it comes closer to the books being published in June, hopefully, Mick will talk about that a little bit further. I'll give you a few more details.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we'll definitely get you on and talk all about the book. I think that'd be great. So I'm excited. That's a good tease right there. Something that's never been revealed before. All right.
Give a few more details later on.
Yeah. Like string people out. We just like start to get those wheels turning. Well, guys, thanks for hanging out with Al and I. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up, and we will talk to you again soon right here on the Cubs Baseball Channel.